Hi everyone, welcome back. So this past week I had a sudden revelation that I've never actually done an eyeshadow palette review on this channel. And to me that is so bizarre because eyeshadow palettes are my favorite thing in makeup. It's what I buy the most of and it's what excites me the most in makeup. So I realize I've done foundation reviews, but that's actually my least favorite product in makeup, so it doesn't make any sense that I've never really done an eyeshadow palette review. Sure, I've incorporated them in like roundups and stuff like that or try-ons, but I've never done videos specifically centered around reviewing palettes. And that's gonna change because I'm starting that today. I'm actually a little bit nervous about doing this simply because I've never done one before. So the format of this may change over time. You're gonna have to let me know what you wanna see and what you don't wanna see in an eyeshadow palette review. For the first one that I'm doing right now, I think I'm going to link to my blog post that will contain swatches, just because I feel like blog photos represent color better than in a video. But if you feel like that's completely unnecessary, just annoying, let me know and I will start doing swatches in the videos. All right, enough chatter. What are we actually talking about today? We are talking about the Zoeva Matte Spectrum palette. As far as I'm aware, you can't get these in Canada. I picked this up in Australia at a Sephora. That's another thing. I had no idea Zoeva was available in Sephora in Australia because it's not in Canada or North America as far as I'm aware. You can't get Zoeva in Sephora here. So I saw Zoeva and I was really curious about trying out their eyeshadows because I've never had access to the brand, so I was like a kid in a candy shop. So I went to the store and the one that intrigued me the most was Matte Spectrum because look at this. It's a rainbow. It's just a rainbow and it's all matte. So I was really excited to try this one out. Now, depending on where you buy this palette, you might get totally different price tags. Sephora Australia lists this as 75 Australian dollars, which is really up there in price tag as far as I'm concerned. The Zoeva website says 52 Canadian, if converted, and I believe it said 35 euros before that. Now, I know the Sephora Australia website said $75, but I don't have the receipt anymore, but I'm convinced that I did not pay that price. I think I paid $60, and I don't think it was on sale at the time. So I don't know if there's a little bit of a discrepancy between what the website says versus what they sell in store, but I paid something around 60 bucks for this palette. Now, what's a little bit different about this palette is that it's printed a little bit more like a book in comparison to most palettes. I think most people expect palettes to like open like this, and frankly, you can open the palette however you want, but it's printed more like a book. So the font goes this way, it says Matte Spectrum. And then I love this, and not every brand does this, but they've got the label on the spine. This is so nice for me because I stack my palettes like they're a book on a bookcase shelf. So for me to have the label on the spine is so handy, particularly when it's a palette that's not very easily identifiable. I mean, it's a matte black palette. You're not really going to be able to pick it out amongst all your other palettes unless it's got fancy packaging. So that's why I really appreciate the label on the spine of the palette. Continuing with this book theme, you open it this way. There is sadly no mirror on the inside, but all the shades are laid out like this with the title of each read this way. Sadly, they don't really have names, they more have like a code number. So for example, the one up here is MT010 and the last one down here is MT150. So it's really just labeling it from 1 to 15. This palette is made in Italy and each shadow contains 1.5 grams of product, which I believe is a healthy amount. I think a MAC shadow does also contain 1.5 grams of product, and I always use that as my baseline for judging other shadows. I feel like 1.5 grams is like the perfect amount. You're getting a decent amount of product. It will take you a long time to get through it, and you're definitely not getting cheated on how much you have. Anything under a gram I feel like is slightly anemic. The brand also does point out that these have superior pigmentation, are easy to blend, and contain vitamin E. The #1 ingredient listed on them though is talc. I don't care either way about talc, but I know some people have some very strong opinions about it. So it does contain talc. If you don't want it, don't go for this palette. All right, so how did I actually feel about this palette? Well, #1, I love the fact that they are all mattes. There is not a hint of shimmer. There's no satinness in this. These are all matte shadows, which for me is really nice. I feel like for so many years, everyone was obsessed with shimmery shades, and that was the only kind of palette you could get on the market. For example, the Urban Decay Naked palette, when that first got released, that was all shimmer and 2 mattes. Like, that's what it used to be like, and now we're going more towards the matte spectrum of things, and I am really happy about that. I was reading that Zoeva did say that these were inspired by leaves and them changing throughout the season. I kind of see it, but if somebody hadn't told me that, I would never have known it. So you start with like the green leaves, and then it sort of goes into like the brown orange that you would get in the fall time. I don't really know how blue and purple works into that, but I like the overall aesthetic of the palette, so they can pick whatever theme they want with it, just make it pretty, which is what I found with this one. So one of the things I found kind of interesting about this palette is that it's got a lot of mid-tone deep shades, but very few pale colors. Now, I'm somebody who's pretty consistent in how I do my eyeshadow. I like a pale lid and a darker outer corner and like a colorful crease. What I'm wearing right now is actually a little bit deep in tone for the lid. I like it, but it's not usually what I go for. So if I'm trying to recreate a look that I always go for, light on the lid, deeper on the outer corner, I'm actually a little bit limited with this palette. This orange row is quite bright and will work for that, and this, I don't know, it's a white with a little bit of a gray cast to it, so it's not something I would necessarily use on the lid consistently because, I mean, I don't do a white lid that often. So it's kind of interesting in the sense that these are the bright shades, and you've got to kind of like use the dark shades in the outer corner. I don't know, it's just something I've noticed time after time, and I just wanted to point it out because there's so many deep tones in this palette, but not a lot of super bright ones. Like, it's almost like we could have had one of these blues could have been a vibrant blue as opposed to being a deep tone, and we could have had another option on the lid. I do also feel like this palette overall has bright, dark, but nothing is deep. There's nothing really deep colored in tone in this one. And funnily enough, there's no dark brown. I don't think I've ever seen that in a palette before. There's always been a dark brown somewhere, so I thought it was really interesting that they just didn't include it. I think that's kind of nice, but some people may be a little bit thrown off by that. On a note about the lightness of some of the tones, I do have to point out that if you're using these colors on your lid and you want to kind of like blow it out with a darker color, in the cool tones, you're kind of screwed. There's not a lot of people that would take an orange lid with a green outer corner or like this kind of like buttery yellow with like, well, actually the blue would look pretty good, but most people wouldn't take that yellow and mix it with a teal. I might try it. It's not something I would tend to go for first, but there's no cool tone pale shades in here. This is the only one that I would use as like a pale shade, and that's in my upper crease today. But just think about that. There are no pale cool tone shades in this palette. I did originally think that there wasn't a brow bone highlight shade for me in here because that's really white and it's got a little bit of a gray cast to it. But if I mix the white with the shade just below it, I can get a brow bone shade that works for me. I'm wearing it right now and I think it looks fine. But fundamentally, there is no brow bone shade for me. These two shades up here are like crease colors for me, so they wouldn't really work on the brow. Anyway, now that I've pointed out the shades, let's talk about the quality. They are really, really good. I thought that there was intense pigmentation right off the bat. They layered very well and they blended nicely. There are some matte shadows on the market that are just problematic. It's like you add one into the crease and then you want to add one into the outer corner, but they just don't layer well. It's almost like they're behaving like chalk and they just won't adhere to each other. That's not a problem with this palette. They will stack on top of each other and they will blend together, which is just an absolute godsend. So I've been using this palette consistently for the last week and I do really, really love it on its own. I think it's a great palette if you want to just go for these rainbow of matte shades. The first look that I did is an orange/red look. I put the orange all over the lid and then plopped the bright red in the outer corner. This is a look I always go to if I have a palette that's got a rainbow of shades in it, and I think that turned out really nicely. So the next day that I was playing around with this palette, I was like, okay, let's use that white shade. So I put the white all over my lid. Really impressed with that white, by the way. I don't usually feel that about white eyeshadows, but I was extremely impressed with how opaque that shade was. And then I put one of the teal turquoise shades on the outer corner and dragged that through my crease. So after I'd played around a little bit with this palette just by itself, I wanted to see how it played with other shadows because I truly felt that this is a palette that should be accompanied by other palettes. Yes, you can use it on its own, but I feel like it's something that can really amp up your look if you use it with all your other products that you have. So I opted to put one of the Stila glitters all over my lid and then took one of the green shades and really buffed that into my outer corner. And I really like how that came out. I mean, maybe glitter is not for everybody, but you could take a shimmery taupe shade that you have and put that green in the outer corner and the look is going to be beautiful. Apparently I was playing around with my Stila glitters quite a bit this past week because the next look also has a Stila glitter on the lid. This time I've either got the purple or the pink through the upper crease, and I've thrown the blue in the outer corner. You will notice a bit of a bad fade out line in the center. That's my fault. I just didn't buff the Stila glitter very well. But you do see how the combination of the colors is really, really pretty. And for today's look, I decided I wanted to play with the cool tones on the lid, so I put that green shade on the middle of my lid, and then I put the lighter toned purple through the crease, and then I put the darker blue on the outer corner. This color combination is a little bit on the darker side of things, and it's not usually something I go for, but I do really like the end result. I also put a little bit of the white on the inner corner so that it would just bring out the colors a little bit more. At the end of the day, yes, I really like this palette, and I think it's not only for the rainbow lovers out there, although I'm sure you guys are going to be the ones who gravitate towards this palette the most, but I think it actually does work for people who usually stick to safe neutrals. As I said, these colors can really help to amp up any look that you feel is just a little bit dull, or maybe something that you do a little bit too consistently. Put one of these in the outer corner and you've got a totally different look. It's gonna be amazing. So yes, the price point is a little bit up there for this palette, depending on where you buy it, because I've got totally different sources saying different things, but I think it's worth the money. However, I need to point something out about when anybody ever says, is it worth the money? No one can tell you that but yourself. I think it's good quality, but I shouldn't be your determining factor on whether or not you purchase something. Only you can decide for yourself if you have the available funds to buy something and you are interested in the product enough. So I might think it's worth the money, but not everybody else is willing to spend that much money on an eyeshadow palette. So please always keep that in mind about my reviews. They are based on whether or not I would spend my own money on it based on my financial situation, which may or may not be the same as yours. So yes, thumbs up for the Zoeva Matte Spectrum for me. I am so glad that I picked it up because I think it's absolutely beautiful. All right, that's gonna be it for this video. Let me know if you like the format. Let me know what I should change. And I'm gonna keep doing these because I love eyeshadow palettes. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time. Bye.